Hi y'all. So this is the second video pertaining to the final portfolio and self-analytical letter. First I'm going to walk through the rubric pretty quickly, and then I'm going to walk through a short outline for the self-analytical letter. So I will put up a copy of this rubric when I can figure out how to make it like a PDF or something so you can actually see the full thing. I've been having issues with that lately. But I'll put that up under the self-analytical tab in Blackboard. And the sample outline that I'm going to walk through is already up there. So if you would like to walk through the outline with me, you can pull that up now. It should be there under the final portfolio tab. So first we're going to walk through this rubric. So hold on one second. Okay. So of course you're concerned mostly with the first two categories of excellent and very good, because that's where you really want to score for each one of these sections. So your first section is inquiry. So the project demonstrates an exceptional ability to create, identify, and engage in significant research questions. So essentially this is your thesis. Because you don't really have a new research question necessarily, what I'll be doing to judge inquiry is looking at the revision that you made and seeing how well you really made that revision. So if you're doing an audience change, I'm going to look for who your new audience is, whether or not that audience is really appropriate for the revision, and how you went about changing things so that it becomes accessible for this new audience. So that's what inquiry is going to relate to. How well did you do this revision? And, was it a wise revision to make in the first place? Okay. Critical engagement with and use of evidence is, your typical thing, your engagement with evidence. So basically, if you have, things cited properly, which they should be because, you've already done all the citations and stuff like that, then you're going to score well in this category. I'm not looking for you to have new evidence necessarily. You might have new sources that you use for the revision, but generally speaking, if you scored well in this category in the revision, in the project before you revise it, then you're going to score well in this category again. I'm looking for you to have interaction with your sources, to avoid hanging quotes, to, make sure that you're not plagiarizing, make sure you're citing things properly, all that good stuff. So like I said, if you scored high in this department before, then good. Just keep it like it is and you'll score high again. If you scored lower in this area before, then you might want to look more closely at my feedback and see what you can do to improve that section of the rubric. Okay, then we have, went too far. Purpose, audience, and context. Same thing as always. Purpose. Did you meet the purpose of the assignment, which was to make a major revision? And how did you meet the purpose? So did you make a major revision? Did you turn in the same paper all over again? Because then you missed the purpose. Audience, again, this is going to be how well you, number one, identify your audience and how you engage with them. And then context is going to be the context of the paper, which is this written in the correct context for the audience that it's intended for, in the genre that it's in, that kind of thing. So again, this is an area that if you scored high in this to start with on the original paper, then you're going to score high in this area again, because I'm not necessarily looking for anything new, except that you are making a major revision, which is the purpose of this assignment, and you have that audience established, especially if you're changing audience, and you're interacting with that audience in the correct way. Okay. Then we have disciplinary conventions. So this is the same thing, as it's always been. Are you meeting the conventions of your discipline? Is this writing going to fit in with your discipline? Are you following that APA format? Are you using the right kind of language, the right kind of tone? You're not going to be coming in and saying like the F word or anything in your paper, because the disciplinary conventions don't call for that kind of language. It's not considered to be appropriate. So, all those little things. Does this fit within your discipline? Again, if you've scored high on this part of the rubric in the past, you'll score high on this part of the rubric again. Not the hardest thing to do. Then formatting the citation, again, scored high before, you'll score high again, because I'm thinking that most of you are not going to be adding any new citations. Now, if you scored low in this area, then that's a place where you're definitely going to want to look back at that feedback and say, oh, I forgot to cite something here, or I'm using the wrong edition of APA, and you want to clean up that kind of stuff. If you scored low before, then you're going to score low again if you don't fix it. So just keep that in mind. But if you did well in this section before, then you're pretty solid to do well in this section again. Expression and organization. So this is going to be both the organization of your project, along with, grammar, syntax stuff. If you scored low here before, and I told you it's because of grammar, syntax, you might want to go make sure that you're going back in and proofreading very closely, just so you can score higher in this section. But you guys, for the most part, are really good as far as organization goes. So I'm not really concerned about that there. But, again, this is a part of the rubric that if you scored well before, you're going to score well again. So just be sure to, basically what you should do is look back at the rubrics for whichever project you're doing. If you're doing 1.2, look back at the rubric that I graded for 1.2 and look and see what my feedback was. What are the things that I was telling you needed improvement? And if you improve those things, you're going to do better on the portfolio portion of it. So, and if you did well, then you don't need to worry about necessarily trying really hard to improve things that you already did well in. Just focus on the parts of the rubric that maybe you didn't do quite as well. And then finally, you have the self-analytical. So this is the letter down here. Now, you'll notice that the weight here says 0. That is because I'm going to grade your portfolio as one thing and your letter as something else. But I need to put it into the same rubric because it just makes things easier for me. But what I'm looking for in the letter, first of all, is for you to explain the revision that you made, the how and why behind it. I talked a little bit about that in the previous video. I want to know the how and why you made this revision. What did you do to go about making this revision? Do you think you did it effectively, et cetera, et cetera? And then finally, you talking about yourself as a writer and how you think the course helped you, what skills you're going to use moving forward, writing in your academic career and maybe even in your professional career. So just keep that in mind. That's basically all the letter is asking you to do. Now, that being said, here is the outline for the letter. All right. So I don't have this put into letter format because I just wasn't going to do all that. But the first thing you'll see here is that it says it needs to be in letter format. So you can look to building bridges for what letter formatting looks like. It usually has the, name and address and kind of location of the sender, right? Is it the sender in the top on the first page? See, I don't even know. But look to building bridges. It's to the recipient.
It's I believe. Well, there are different formats, but yeah, it's basically the address of the recipient.
Please hold.
And then you go into the salutation.
Okay. Well, but regardless, you can look to building bridges. If you look in the back of building bridges, there's the samples of student writing there. And there'll be samples of this self-analytical letter. Now, when you look at building bridges, do not freak out because those letters are going to be between 4 and 6 pages long because that's what the original assignment calls for. But due to the COVID situation, I've, of course, cut that length back to 2 to 3. So don't look at that letter and think that you need to have 4 to 6 pages because you don't. You need to have 2 to 3. And as usual, Times New Roman, 12-point font, double-spaced. It'll look like a letter. You want it to look like a letter. So, okay. Then, let's see, what do we got here? This is an analytical reflection of your experience revising your paper. It's not a summary of likes or dislikes, course materials, teaching methods, etc. Essentially, you can talk about elements of the course, but only in the context of how they shaped your writing skills. So again, it's not I don't want you to say, I think there are too many papers in this course. I don't care if you think there are too many papers in this course. What does that have to do with you as a writer? So any kind of mention that you're going to make about instruction or about assignments or, day-to-day class, whatever, it has to go back to you as a writer and how your writing has improved or maybe not improved or maybe you didn't learn a damn thing. It just has to come back to you as the writer. It's not an evaluation of the course. It's not an opportunity to rant about how COVID ruined your life. It's none of that. So just make sure that you're coming back to, you as a writer and your writing skills. All right. So for the intro, what you might do is notice here I have briefly italicized because I do mean briefly. Briefly discuss your experience with writing before taking the class. This might take you 1 to 2 sentences. So you might say, before this class, I really, really hated English. I struggled writing papers. I was bad at formatting. I was bad at doing research. I mean, you might say a number of things. Or you might say, I thought that I was really good at this thing and then I found out that I wasn't. Or you might say, I was really good at this thing and this class has helped me to improve my, sentence level writing or something like that. But just a brief kind of what was your experience with writing before you took 2201. Next thing you'll do is, again, briefly discuss any concerns you had heading into the class or individual projects. So here you're probably going to want to focus on the project that you're going to revise. So if you're going to revise 1.2, what you might do is say, when Miss Parrish introduced 1.2, or I guess you'd say you because it's addressed to me, when 1.2 was introduced, I had never written a rhetorical analysis before, and I was a little bit worried that I might not do well on this assignment. You might say something like that. Or you might say, when 1.2 was introduced, I had done, several rhetorical analysis papers in the past, so I was excited because this was something I was familiar with, blah, 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 blah. But if you had concerns about the project before, when you were initially writing it, this would be the place where you might explain a little bit of what that concern was and why you had it. So just think about that. And you're also going to want to identify audience here, which should be me, Miss Parrish, of course. And you definitely want to identify in the introduction, you want to set up which project you have chosen to revise. So in total, your introduction is probably going to be 5-6 sentences at the most. It may even be more like 4. Depending on, how your sentences are styled. Okay, so when we move into the body, we're going to do a few things. So first, you're going to discuss the initial assignment. So tell me about the guidelines, the concerns you had, what your planning and writing process looked like, and this will probably take you about 3 to 5 sentences. So, we'll stick with 1.2. You might say, so 1.2 asked us to take 2 scholarly articles from our field and do a rhetorical analysis on them. I was concerned about doing this because I've never been very good at rhetorical analysis. To start, I picked out 2 projects and then I annotated, 2 projects. I picked out 2 sources and then I went through and annotated my sources so I could better understand them. And then I, color-coded to pick out places where the audience was established in my source, et cetera, et cetera. So just what was your planning and writing process like? Again, this is probably be about 3 to 5 sentences. So the next you're going to tell me about the grade that you received. So here you'll talk about what the grade told you. So was your paper successful? Was it unsuccessful? Did you agree with my feedback? Did you think that my feedback was confusing, or did you find it not helpful? Did it help you to get a better plan moving forward for the future projects? Anything that you learned from the grade and the feedback that you received. So this might be between 4 and 6 sentences long, depending on, how much your grade actually affected your revision process. So if you read my feedback and really didn't use it in the revision, you're probably not going to talk about it all that much. But if you read my feedback and it had a major effect on how and why you made the revisions that you made, then you're going to talk about that grade a little bit more. Okay. And then you're going to describe the revision you chose to make and why. So this is going to be the longest portion of the letter, probably between 5 and 9 sentences. So, you might tell me what led you to choose that revision, how you went about making the revision, how that choice of revision affected the audience that you're interacting with here. Basically, it's going to be here's why I chose the revision, and then here's how I did it. So if you decided to change the audience, or actually let's say you decided to change the purpose for 1.2 from a rhetorical analysis into an instructional paper about how to do a rhetorical analysis, you'll tell me why you made that decision. Maybe it's because you thought it would be helpful for incoming freshmen or something like that. And then you'll tell me how you went about making that change. So, did you break it down and do a step-by-step? Here's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, instructions for how to do a rhetorical analysis. Did you have to rewrite some of the paper to better, incorporate the instructions in? You're just going to tell me what you had to do to accomplish the revision that you chose to make. Not super hard. You're basically just describing, how and why. That's it. So let me back up a little bit. So in this body here, under this body section, you'll notice there's 1, 2, 3. So you probably want to do 1 paragraph, 2 paragraph, 3 paragraph. That's probably going to be the best way to go about this. You might have to break up your revision section into 2. So you might do like the why in 1 paragraph and the how in another, just because if you put all of that together, it may look funny as far as your paragraph consistency, because you might have like a 4-page or 4-sentence paragraph, 4-sentence paragraph, and then suddenly an 8-sentence paragraph. So just use your judgment on that. You want to have paragraph consistency. You guys know how I feel about paragraphs. Usually, you don't want to go over a half of a page with a single paragraph, and you don't want to go from a half a page paragraph to a 2-sentence paragraph to a 9-sentence paragraph to a 4-sentence. You don't want to jump all around. So just use your judgment with that. So yeah, there's your body. And then finally, when you move into your conclusion, it's going to be what you learned in the revision process. And notice too that this says 3 to 4 sentences. So this might be its own paragraph as well. It might be more like part of the body of the letter rather than part of the conclusion. So then have your feelings about writing changed moving forward. Take a couple of sentences. How was the overall experience in 2201 for you? A couple of sentences. How will you How will you use what you've learned moving forward in your academic career or in your professional career? That could also be part of it. Again, 1 to 2 sentences. And then when you actually close up, make sure you're doing it with that closing salutation, because this is a letter. So, sincerely, truly yours, whatever salutation you feel is necessary. So the other thing I want to say really quickly about this conclusion is I've posed a few questions here. You might not necessarily answer all of these questions. It may be that you have a lot to say about how you're going to use these skills moving forward in your academic or professional career, and that becomes 3 or 4 sentences rather than 1 to 2. That's fine. So don't feel like you absolutely have to answer all of these questions in your conclusion. You may or may not. But don't feel pressured to, and that's the other thing too about this outline, guys. As with any outline that I've ever given you guys, it's not something that you absolutely have to follow to a T. I'm certainly not going to take off points if your outline does not follow this, or your letter doesn't follow this exact outline. So, just keep that in mind. I'm not so mean that I would, break down your letter and say, oh, you didn't have 5 sentences in your conclusion, so that's 3 points off. I don't care that much. Use your judgment. Organize it the way that you think is logical organization. Just like anything else, though, you're making sure that you're not going to jump back and forth from one thing to another. Like, you don't want to start by explaining 1.2 paper guidelines and then talk about what you learned from the course and then circle back around to the guidelines and why you found them confusing when you first started. You know what I mean? So just make sure that however you organize it, it is logical organization. Your ideas are clearly connected from one place to another. That kind of thing. And again, that sample is for you guys to have as a guide. It's not something that you have to, set in stone follow. The main thing that I'm looking for, again, is the how and why with the revision. Why'd you pick the revision that you picked, and how'd you go about implementing the revision? And then, your growth as a writer in the class, the way that you think that your writing has been strengthened, the things that you'll use moving forward in your academic or professional career, or both. But yeah, that's essentially it. Again, guys, if you have questions, concerns, please reach out. If you just want to say hello, please reach out. I'm going to keep my Kick open after the semester ends. For those of you who might want to pop in and say hi from time to time, you're absolutely more than welcome to. At some point, my ECU email will disappear. So if you try to email me in the summertime and I don't reply to you, it's probably because I no longer exist in ECU's domain. So if you want to be able to contact me later on and can't get to me via email, just add me on Kick. I think it's ms.p_from_ECU. I think that's my Kick name. I don't know. Anyway, it's somewhere. It's listed somewhere on Blackboard. So if you do want to contact me, please feel free. I'm more than happy to just chat with you, say hello, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be, related to class. And again, guys, just stay safe. It's been a great semester. I really appreciate y'all's flexibility. I know this hasn't been an easy transition for you. It hasn't been an easy transition for me either. And I just really appreciate, you guys actually watching the videos, reading the things that I post, that kind of thing. I've missed you guys a lot, and I hate that it had to end like this, but it's out of our hands. So stay safe, wash your hands, stay 6 feet away from each other. Don't leave your house unless you absolutely have to. Don't freak out. Toilet paper will be back at some point, maybe, if we're lucky. Okay, guys.